What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today to bring you part two, basically, of the video that I did last week talking about selling these running backs now. It was that was the title of the video. It was about Dalvin Cook and Joe Mixon, all these guys that are in their primes right now. Today, we're going to be fully diving into the running back shelf life / mileage discussion again. I talked about it in the other video, and if you guys missed it, I'll link it down below. But to quickly summarize what I talked about, we determined that there is a number of highly valued fantasy running backs in Dynasty right now, Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, etc., that are approaching a dangerous combination of age and career touches, where historically running backs have seen a drop off in efficiency, in fantasy production, and their health as well. So today we're diving into part two of that discussion. I'll explain why I'm making a second video on this after the intro. But if you're new around here and you enjoy the video at any point, please hit the like button. It's totally free to do so, and it helps us out tremendously. If you haven't already done so as well, hit the subscribe button. You can always unsubscribe later. I know there's plenty of you guys out there, 65, 70% of you that are watching these videos that aren't subscribed. Again, it's totally free to do so. So please hit the subscribe button and comment any of your thoughts down below as well. So we're going to hit the intro and then we're going to get right into this. Okay, so why am I doing this again, right? I put a video out last week. You guys seem to really enjoy it, appreciate the feedback on that. But why am I doing this again? The reason is because of CXK's comment on the last video. So shout out to him because he provoked a thought in me that kind of piqued my interest. And it's not specifically what he asked, because he asked, just curious, does this data take into consideration running backs that are not on a team but not retired, for example? For example, Todd Gurley isn't on a team, but is he, counted in this study? And the reason, it's not specifically what he asked, but the reason I decided to make another video on this is because he's right. I don't know what running backs were used in those samples and in those studies. Is it only RB1 caliber fantasy running backs? Is it only RB1 and 2 caliber fantasy running backs? Or is it just any and all running backs in the NFL? I really had no idea. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. I conducted my own study using my own sample. And the sample that I chose was this. Since I'm talking about selling elite or once elite fantasy running backs like Ezekiel Elliott, like Dalvin Cook, like Alvin Kamara, like Joe Mixon, like Nick Chubb, my sample needed to be only elite fantasy running backs. So below, you will see a sample of only running backs that finished as multi-time RB1s, because Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, Ezekiel Elliott, Derrick Henry, etc., they have all finished as RB1s multiple times. So there's a lot going on in this table, so I'll quickly explain what I did here. The factors that I looked for were obviously how many RB1 seasons they had, because they needed to be a multi-time RB1 finisher. Number two was how old were they during those seasons? I wanted to see, were they, 26, 27 when this happened, or were they relatively young? When they dropped off, so what year they dropped off in, and as well, how many PPR points per game they lost from their previous season, their previous RB1 season in fantasy. And also, how old were they in September at the beginning of the season of their drop-off year? How many career touches did they have prior to the season that they dropped off? And finally, how did their Dynasty ADP change? Now, you guys are going to notice a couple of things, a couple notes that I have here. Obviously, these are very well-known guys. I expect most of you guys to know who these guys are, especially if you've been playing fantasy for a long time. But I also decided to include Ezekiel Elliott and Melvin Gordon, who are the two most recent examples of running back fallouts, because, well, they've already fallen off. And I know Ezekiel Elliott's going to have his truthers out there, but the reality of the situation is he saw a 5-point drop off from 2019 to 2020. And then it kind of sustained that same production this year again. And I know, somebody commented on the previous video, he was RB4 before he got injured, but that kind of proved my point of the video. Once these guys get this age and touch apex, they're going to start getting injured. They're going to start losing efficiency. They're going to start losing fantasy production. So I included Ezekiel Elliott in Melvin Gordon in this list, even though that they were fantasy relevant last year. If you guys are wondering why certain players are highlighted in yellow, the ones that are highlighted in yellow are either in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, or they're future Hall of Famers, or there's a couple guys like Steven Jackson, Tiki Barber, or Sean Alexander who aren't actually in the Hall of Fame yet, but they have been nominated for the Hall of Fame. So I expect them to get in at some point. So anybody in yellow is going to be in the Hall of Fame someday. And the last note is that Dynasty Fantasy Football is relatively new. So anybody that has not available listed under their Dynasty ADP just means that Dynasty Fantasy Football ADP didn't exist for those guys, because Dynasty Fantasy Football ADP, the earliest I could find it is on DLF, and the earliest year that they have is 2012. So anybody that is an old school running back like Steven Jackson, Frank Gore, Ricky Williams, all these guys, Dynasty fantasy football didn't exist then. So I don't have ADP for those guys. And let's look at this chart overall. Here are the takeaways. On average, running backs in this sample were falling off about 6.0 PPR points per game at about the age of 28 and a half and around 1,700 career touches. Now, those numbers are a lot higher than the ones I talked about in the last video. I talked about, between 1,250, 1,500 touches as the first sign of running backs dropping off. And when these running backs fell off, they lost around 19 spots of ADP based on the running backs that I actually have ADP for. But as you can probably imagine, this running back data set is extremely skewed by some of these Hall of Fame talents because there is a bunch of historical outliers like LaDainian Tomlinson, for example, who did not fall off until 3,167 career touches. Hence why he was a first ballot Hall of Famer, right? So I refined the data set down further to include only multi-time running back ones that are not going to be in the Hall of Fame someday or not already in the Hall of Fame. So this is the list that I came up with here. You guys can see it's a little bit more clean than the previous one. This is a much more accurate representation, in my opinion, of the current crop of running backs that we're talking about. Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, Leonard Fournette, Austin Eckler, some of these guys that are, 25, 26, 27 with about 1,000 or more career touches under their belt. These averages here are much more accurate, in my opinion. We have 1,395 as the touch. Now, on average, these guys were still falling off around 6.0 PPR points per game, and their fall off around age 28, but the touch count fell significantly from the previous study that I talked about, from just under 1,700 career touches to just under 1,400 career touches. 19 of the 30 running backs in this data set fell off before 1,500 career touches, which is about 63%. The running backs on average lost 16 spots of Dynasty ADP among the running back position. So let's say they were running back 6. Before the season, they were running back 22 after their fall off season. And 11 of the 16 running backs that we have Dynasty ADP for, like I said, it was only new school running backs that we had Dynasty ADP for. 69% of them lost 10 or more spots of ADP after they fell off. Now, one final refinement I wanted to make just to see if this was accurate or not, and it proved to end up being accurate, is that you'll notice a lot of these large touch count running backs happened early in the data set, right? Fred Taylor, Corey Dillon, Priest Holmes, Jamal Lewis. My inclination was that these guys are built better back in the day than they are now. They were, Jamal Lewis was like 245 pounds. Like he was a built dude. He was Derrick Henry caliber sized. And as I talked about in the first video, I showed a graph where running back fall offs were happening, quicker and quicker as the years and the decades went along in the NFL. So they are, as you guys can see on the screen, this new refined data set includes only new school running backs. So I excluded all the old school running backs, and you can see that the averages fell off even more. The average age fell to age 27. The average touches fell to 1,133, and the ADP drop off went to RB 8.5 or RB 9, whatever you want to call it, before their drop off season to RB 23 after, which was about a 15 ADP drop off. Now, Le'Veon Bell and Jamal Charles were the only guys to exceed 1,500 touches before their actual drop off came into fruition. That's 2 out of 13 running backs in this sample size, or only 15%, meaning 85% of these running backs fell off before 1,500 touches. So that's basically the point of both of these videos. The point of both of these videos is not to tell you, all these running backs are dead and they're screwed. The point of this video is to tell you to try and shop these guys. And I need to repeat this point again because apparently I didn't make it clear in the last video, or maybe people just skipped ahead. I really encourage you to hear me out before, go to the comment section and tell me that I'm, an ageist running back hater or whatever. Am I saying that Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, Nick Chubb, Ezekiel Elliott, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, Joe Mixon, basically any running back that is not on their rookie contract will stink next year? Absolutely not. That is not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying is that history suggests that 60 to 80% of these guys will fall off very soon, and probably this season for the most part. And the reason for their fall off could be 3 different factors. Like I said, it could be efficiency related, like we saw with Ezekiel Elliott recently, like we saw with David Johnson recently, like we saw with Doug Martin. They just lost a step, right? They just got less efficient. The touch workload that they had over the course of their careers caught up to them, and they lost a step from that perspective. For Arian Foster, for Todd Gurley, it was injury related. So it could be a multitude of factors. I can't predict injuries, but this is the best way of predicting injuries is knowing how many career touches they have under their belt. Young running backs tend to get less injured and less often than older running backs for that reason. It's all about minimizing your downside risk in Dynasty. We're setting a fantasy football stop loss order. And like I talked about in last video, if I called up my stockbroker and I told them I wanted him to sell this stock once it dips below 10%, otherwise just keep, letting it work. That's basically the concept that we're bringing to fantasy football. Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, all these guys are at a fantasy football stop loss order right now because they still have a lot of value on the open market. People are going to want to trade for them, especially contenders in your leagues. And you can minimize your downside risk by simply swapping them out for a younger running back or draft capital, etc., or just going completely in a different direction and going for a wide receiver or a quarterback who have long-term value insulation relative to the running back position. The reality of the situation is running backs don't last very long in the NFL, and they don't last very long in fantasy even more so, because we're seeing most running backs last 2 to 3 years of really high-level fantasy production, and then they fall off a cliff. Once again, let's take a look at the touch leaders that you should be shopping for cheaper alternatives. Now, again, the benchmarks that we talked about for the new school running backs, non-Hall of Fame caliber guys, were 1,100 touches and 27 years of age. And you guys can see certain guys have already passed both metrics, right? We have Derrick Henry, who's already over both things. And as I talked about in last video, maybe Derrick Henry reaches the Hall of Fame someday and becomes a statistical outlier. He's obviously got the size to hold up over time. But Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey, Leonard Fournette, Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb, etc. These guys are in the danger zone right now. They're not quite 27. They're not quite, some of them, at 1,100 career touches yet, but they will be soon. And that is the point that you want to sell right now before they hit that, drop off. Because as soon as fantasy players are very reactive, we're very smart. We know when a player has fallen off. If Nick Chubb goes out there next year and looks like he's lost a step, his dynasty value is going to plummet. Same goes for Dalvin Cook. Same goes for Joe Mixon. Same goes for any of these guys if they get injured as well, because then suddenly you have a 26, 27-year-old running back coming off of a major injury. Now, here are their market values. If you guys are curious where these guys are going currently on the market right now, we have Christian McCaffrey at RB6, RB7 for Joe Mixon, RB8 for Austin Eckler, RB10 for Dalvin Cook, etc. You guys can see them on the screen. And if you're asking yourself the question, what should I get for these guys in a trade? You're talking all this stuff about selling these guys. What should I be looking to get if I'm selling them? Now, here's how they rank among young running backs. So as you guys can see on the open market right now, J.K. Dobbins is worth slightly more than Dalvin Cook, meaning that you can get J.K. Dobbins in exchange for Joe Mixon, in exchange for Austin Eckler. And I'd be willing to bet if it's a contender, you can probably get J.K. Dobbins plus. Same goes for getting Antonio Gibson in exchange for Dalvin Cook, or getting, Travis Etienne in exchange for Nick Chubb, or Alvin Kamara, or Cam Akers, or David Montgomery, or Saquon Barkley, any of these guys that have not reached this age apex or anything like that. So according to the market value, those are the running backs that you can get, relatively speaking, in the same range. Or you can simply shop them for 2022 draft picks, or you can shop them for 2023 draft picks if you're okay retooling for a year. And if you have any specific trade questions, should I sell, Dalvin Cook for the 104 this year? Feel free to leave it down below in the comments and I will engage with you there and I'll answer your question. All right. I hope by now you understand my process and my philosophy for why I am selling these running backs at their age and touch apexes. One of my favorite videos to make so far this offseason. I always like to be, a freak in the spreadsheets, get involved, conduct studies and exercises like this. If you guys want more Dynasty content, if you want more content like this, leave any suggestions for videos down below. If you want more Dynasty content, check out the Patreon. Link is in the description for that. Our Dynasty rankings are available one of two ways now. If you want our Dynasty rankings, you can get them either on Patreon, or Dynasty Rankings Manifesto is available on there, or you can sign up and deposit on Underdog Fantasy using the promo code FSE. You'll get 100% match back on whatever you put in. So if you put in $50, you'll get $100 on the site to play with. And you'll also get our Dynasty rankings totally for free. Tons of March Madness stuff going on right now. If you guys are college basketball fans, they also have Superflex best ball drafts that you can, if you're a complete degenerate like me and you can want to get ahead of the ADP and you want to do some Superflex best ball drafts, you can go ahead and do those over on Underdog Fantasy. Like I said, link is in the description for that. Promo code FSE at sign up and first deposit. Like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed this video, guys. Peace out, and I'll talk to you soon.